Tonight we're going to do one of, we hope, like 3 different programs on the same issue. That issue being the cleanup of the Portland Willamette River. And we're going to, there's a comment period going on, and we're going to, we're going to go over some of these things as we go on through the hour. We got a little video that's on the one of the Portland Harbor cleanup websites, and we'll give you a lot of information that you can search up on this. I know that it seems like I've mentioned this to a few people, and they just go blank, like this isn't on their radar. And if you're an environmentalist, and even if you don't use the river's important. It's part of Portland. But we have Barbara Quinn, who's with the Portland Harbor Community Advisory Group. There's also another group, the Portland Harbor Community Coalition. And these are separate groups, but they're all trying to do the same thing. We've got the on board also is Bob Salinger with the Portland Audubon Society. And we're going to talk about the tribes, I think, in a while that they're on. Just recently out at Metro East, we had, I don't remember which tribe, I think he might have been Umatilla, came on with one of the members within these groups to talk about this issue from the standpoint of the Native Americans as well as the coalitions. So we're going to get into that tonight. Welcome to the program, Barbara.
Thank you.
I think
Thanks,
you were on a while back, and we determined it was almost a full year ago because there was an event you were talking about that's coming full circle, and it's going to be the 31st.
That's right. Last year we had the Willamette River Festival in early August, and this year we've got it on July 31st.
Well, this year we might worry about it raining the way things are.
You never know. I was just at the big float and there was rain, so yeah.
So, well, I know I learned quite a bit about this, a lot of which I have probably forgotten. When Bob Salinger came on, he's a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
From the Audubon Society, and I don't even know where to begin. I was thinking begin digging. Well, we'll just talk about how the Willamette River, all this is in the sediment.
That's right, and I think there's a lot of people who don't realize that what we're talking about here is the sediments, not necessarily the water column, but what's down on the bottom of the river that's been there for now over 100 years.
So why not just leave it there then?
Well, we can't leave it there because what's happening is the animals that live in the sediment are serving as the basis of the food chain, and it's getting up into the fish from the sediment, and then people are catching the fish, other animals are eating smaller animals, and it's getting into the system from the sediments.
The bioaccumulation.
It's bioaccumulating, and it magnifies as it goes up. Some of these chemicals magnify as they go up the food chain, so it's not acceptable. They're unsafe. And then it's also true, they just finished a study last year that shows that PCBs, which are the chemical of most concern in the Willamette River, can go airborne. And that means they're a very toxic chemical, cancer-causing chemical, and they go into the air where you cannot see them or smell them, and they can affect an area, say, around the river of maybe 5 miles. So it affects everybody. The river toxins affect everybody in Portland, not just the lower Willamette, which is a very long stretch of river. Yeah.
Well, if the PCBs get up into the air, they're going to have to tell the lead and the cadmium to move over. Huh?
That's right.
So we're finding out about all these different things. Portland, the Green City, is toxic.
Yeah, you're right. That is true. It's a lot more so than people realize. Yeah.
And so to back up, when Bob was on, there was in the future at that time, there was a study by the EPA for like 10 years, and they were going to make a decision, and everybody had their hopes, but the EPA, it's supposed to be a government agency that's, the government's the people, and unfortunately the decision that they came out with just recently, I'm not that familiar with the details of it, but it's really not doing that much good for the river, apparently.
You're absolutely right. It's not doing very much good for the river. It only touches about 8% of the river.
That's polluted.
Right. The entire river, the entire 11-mile stretch is polluted, and they only plan on removing 8%, and they plan on leaving the toxins in 92%. And so none of the community stakeholders, none of the community groups are happy with that at all.
Yeah. But I bet the polluters are.
Well, they're not real happy either.
Oh.
So
well, you can't please all the people all the time, or any
Yeah.
of the people sometimes.
yeah, that's true.
So what are they going to do? They're just going to take 8% of maybe the worst place, or are they going to take a little here and a little there? How's that working out?
Well, they have 13 hot spots,
Okay.
major hot spots, and they're suggesting just taking the worst of the worst. And that means a lot of the toxins will still be left in the river. So the problem with that, and the EPA is using language of, well, we're going to let nature take its course. We're going to let natural recovery fix the river for us. The problem with that is that the toxins that are in the river are persistent contaminants, and they do not break down. Or they break down so slowly that you have to consider that they're pretty much permanent. The metals like lead, cadmium, and those things that are in the air, they do not break down ever. And PCBs don't break down in any known time frame, so they may as well be just like the metals. So nature is not going to take care of those for us. Although it sounds really nice, nature is not going to get rid of those chemicals for us. They will stay in the river for all time, and they will tend to wash down the river into the lower Columbia. So that's a problem for the people that are advocating for the Columbia as well.
Now, those are probably the people that would believe that the solution to pollution is dilution.
Well,
I mean, that's not really the solution. It's pushing it down the road, maybe.
It's pushing it down the road, and if it's persistent contaminant, it's not going anywhere. It's going to continue to get in fish wherever it goes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to continue to get in the food chain and and go into the air and cause trouble. So we are saying, all the community groups are saying, there needs to be more removal.
It seems to me that if you got 11-mile stretch, and you just go in there and dig out some of it in one area and some of it in another area, well, there's going to be that interface between where they dig it up and where they don't, and that's going to open that up, it would seem to me, unless they're going to get down there and somehow put a wall between where they dredged and what's left behind. They're just opening it up to basically bleed more, I would think.
Well, I think there's some concern about that. There's a lot of concern about that from the community groups.
Mm-hmm.
We think that they should dredge a wider area than they're suggesting, and not just the most contaminated area and then let the other contaminants roll right back in there. They need to we feel to have an effective cleanup, they need to remove more.
Mm-hmm.
And the community groups want safety first. We want safe fish. We want this cleanup we all agree, we want this cleanup to end in fish that are as safe as fish that are just immediately upriver. We also want to see people have access to the river and be safe. People should be able to swim in the river. Little kids should be able to swim in the river at the beach at Cathedral Park. Excuse me. Currently, it's not really that safe to swim near the sediments. It's not really safe to swim near the edges where most of the contaminants are. The people that are forced to camp on the river because they're houseless, they're getting exposed to far more. People that fish, which happen to be the more ethnic groups, the people from ethnic traditions, people of color, they're getting exposed to more contaminants than everyone else. And we want safety with this cleanup. The cleanup shouldn't just be a little bit of cleanup that doesn't really result in safety for people. We are the owners of the river. The community is the owner of the river, and all the community groups are asking for better safety, and that means more removal of these persistent toxins.
Mm-hmm. Well, aside from the fact that the city shouldn't have let that happen to begin with.
I agree.
But way back when, everybody thought, well, we can just mine down the Rocky Mountains and let it all go down in the rivers. It'll all be diluted. It doesn't matter. Down in Redding, where I'm from, there's big scars from copper mines up on the hill, and you get up there, and the water is just red with contaminants. And that cavalier attitude was in the early days of Portland as well.
Yeah.
From cutting down the trees to just using it as a dump.
Well, I agree, and that's been the problem here. The river's been used as a waste stream, and it still is. Mm-hmm. It still is. We're not really happy. We community members not really happy with the permits that DEQ issues to dump in the river. A lot of the pollution that's coming into the river is permitted. So we can't understand why they're permitting as much pollution as they are.
So are they permitting the same kind of pollution that constitutes the hot spots
To some degree, yes. They will allow a certain amount.
of PCBs? I don't know where that comes from.
I'm
but-
not sure. PCBs are no longer manufactured, so people are not purposefully dumping PCBs in the river anymore. But Monsanto did such a good job of designing PCBs not to break down that they're not breaking down. And even though they haven't been manufactured since the 70s, they're still all
still
over
there.
the place. They're in the air, they're in the water, they're everywhere.
I know another one that's really bad is dioxins.
We've got those too.
Those two, because I know that there's the Columbia has been dioxified, is there such word, from Canada all the way down. I know, especially up in Canada, I guess there's a lot of that going on.
Well,
There
that's not good.
There was a fellow that swam all the way from the beginning to the end. I forget the name of it. He gets on the show and talked about it.
Wow.
And you know, he didn't swim straight, but
Yeah.
you know, that's quite a chore just to bring people's consciousness to the Columbia River, and now we need to do that same thing with the Willamette River. So you're talking about 11 miles. What is that, from the falls to the confluence, or
No, it's from the confluence all the way to about the Broadway Bridge. Yeah,
So that's where all the industry was south of that.
that's where most of the hot spots are, and there's 13 hot spots in that area, and it covers about 10 miles. And the hot spots aren't the only pollution, but they're the main concentrations. And each one of those 13 hot spots could almost be its own Superfund. It's a very large site. It's probably one of the largest. It is one of the largest sites in the whole country. Yeah.
So this started 10 years ago. How did it get started?
Well,
You may not be privy to the history of it, but
I'm privy to a little bit of the history of it. I know that 10 years, in 2000, actually it was 15 years ago, 16 years ago, DEQ did some measurements and saw that there was too much toxin in the river to be safe for humans and wildlife. And so they proposed to do basically by law, because of the amount of toxins in the river, they had to react. They had to do a cleanup. At some point, the EPA came into the picture and said that they were going to take charge of the in-water cleanup, and DEQ was going to take charge of the land cleanup. So since then, they've been studying and negotiating with businesses and coming up with a plan to do the actual cleaning.
Well, I remember a while back I went to a public testimony. It was years ago.
Yeah.
And on this same subject, and the folks that were there, they were screaming for it then, and there was a few of the corporations, and maybe they weren't all corporations that did the pollution. Some of them were signing on to help out, but I understand, according to what Bob was saying, there's not a lot of that going on.
No, there's not as much of that going on as we would like to see. And some of the corporations that are adjacent to the river are some of the biggest in the world. Exxon.
That's not good.
No, well, ExxonMobil, Bayer Crop Science, Chevron, BP, Shell. Some of these companies are multinational companies that make billions of dollars. They've made very good money on our river.
Not only do they make billions of dollars, but I'm sure some of them are getting tax breaks and subsidies at the same time.
Well, you're probably right. Yeah, they probably are. But one of the reasons they're so very profitable is that they have used irresponsible dumping practices in many cases. And we community members feel that in a democracy, if we have a democracy and the river, the water is the commons, if someone damages the water, they need to make it right. They need to fix it. And we're not finding that attitude to be necessarily very prevalent in the business community. And understand people are concerned about costs and people are concerned about responsibility, whether they had responsibility for this or that. But it would be really nice to see businesses and entities, they're not all businesses, some are agencies. It'd be really nice to see them step forward.
Well, yeah, it just seems so often you hear the story that these multinational or large corporations, maybe even large sole proprietorships, the profits all go up to the top, but the cleanup and all that has to go to the taxpayer.
And that's one thing that we as community representatives are really fighting. We do not want to see the taxpayers unfairly burdened with this cleanup. This cleanup belongs to the polluters, and by EPA law, they are responsible for the cleanup. However, it turns out that the city of Portland has paid something in the order of $50 to $60 million of our ratepayer money to do the feasibility study.
Just to study it.
Just to study it. And there's no way that the ratepayers are responsible for that much of the cleanup that we know of.
Mm-hmm.
The ratepayers are only going to be responsible for orphan sites, and we don't think we have that many. So we hope that the city fights on behalf of its citizens and does not allow those costs to be passed on to us. And people need to say that when they comment to the EPA and when they comment to political leaders. And I suggest that we CC all our political leaders on this, because we're not seeing a lot of leadership in the political arena, local arena, for the cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
Citizens should not be saddled with these costs at all, as far as I'm concerned. We did not have anything to do with placing industrial waste on the bottom of the river, and those who did and profited from it should be the ones that clean it up.
And those who allowed it, which is the city.
Well, in some cases the city is pretty lax, and so is the state, and we don't understand why they allow some of the things that they allow.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, a lot of it wasn't. They weren't diligent enough, and a lot of it might have been, I'm cynical about it, that they decided that the business and the jobs and all that warranted, kicking Mother Earth to the side a little bit.
Well, I think there is that thought that viewpoint out there that the river is best and biggest use is as a waste stream for industry, but I don't agree with that. I think there's a lot of people who don't agree with that, and the river is part of a very large and important system in the state of Oregon that covers thousands of square miles, and it's an essential link in the chain of that system. We can't really bypass the fact that endangered species are using that part of the river. People are using that part of the river. People have a right to fish there and swim there and recreate on the river safely.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just for industry. Industry is an important stakeholder, but they're not the only stakeholder. And sometimes we get the feeling that maybe they're given too much. They're given a different kind of stakeholdership than everyone else, and that should not be the way it is.
Well, I guess that just brings us right to the decision that was recently made. It seems like it was heavily balanced towards the stakeholders who are the polluters, rather than the stakeholders that are the citizens.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that assessment. It seems that it's a very weak proposal. Now, it's not a decision. The decision hasn't been made yet. It's a proposal. The EPA put out a proposal to do a cleanup that we feel is fairly weak. In fact, it's very weak.
Might make it worse.
Well, I don't think it'll make it worse, but it's not strong enough to actually give people safety.
Mm-hmm.
So what we really need to happen now is that now that this proposal is out, we have what they call a comment period. What we really need is for people in the community to comment to the EPA, tell the EPA they want to see the river safe, they want to see fish safe to eat, they want to see more dredging, less nature, because once again, nature doesn't do anything with persistent pollutants like PCBs, can't break them down. And that message needs to go very strongly to EPA in big numbers, because we saw in other Superfunds that the amount of responses from the community and what the responses are can change.
That's going to drive the whole scenario.
It could drive the plan in a better direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I know that part of what you want to do on this program is to encourage people, which you just have done, to comment on this. And there was a particular website, I don't know if we got that up on the graphics, that they can go directly into commenting.
Yeah.
Which website was that?
That was a cleanupportlandharbor.org. Is that correct? Yeah.
Was that
CleanUpPortlandHarbor.org.
the native one or the?
That is the one that the Yakima Nation did in collaboration
There
with
it
all
is.
the other community groups. CleanUpPortlandHarbor.org.
All right, graphic guys on the ball tonight. Good. Yeah, so they can go on this and go directly to a comment.
They can go comment directly on that site, and they can write down comments and add them in. They can, and actually that site CCs our political leaders too, it did about a week ago. Then some of the political leaders complained. So I'm not sure if it still does, but it's a very excellent site and put up by the Yakima Nation, and all of us community stakeholders are telling people to go to that site and comment. And then we, Portland Harbor Community Advisory Group, also has a site that has lots of information on it. Our consultant, Peter Defer, has a list of issues. I think he has something like 10 to 12 issues that he's seen in his preliminary review of the plan.
That aren't being addressed by the plan?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So they can go on our site, and right up at the top of our homepage is information about Dr. Defer's comments.
Which one of those is not this one? So what is
It's
that?
the one that's just below it, portlandharborcag.info.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good to know. That I'm always very skeptical and cynical about these comment periods. I guess basically because I was so involved for so long with Forest Service and their comment periods. You know, they just collect the comments and do what they plan to do all along. And if you get enough comments, then they have to address that.
That's right. And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for mass comments and people to say, what they want. Do they want a weak cleanup that continues to let PCBs go into the air and affect people in a 5-mile radius? No. The damage that's been done to the river needs to be fixed. And these companies worth billions of dollars certainly have the resources to fix it. Many of them are doing very well. In fact, the very top 10 companies, we did a little bit of research, the very top 10 companies as far as earnings that have businesses on Portland Harbor have assets somewhere in the nature of $10 billion. So they're they've done nicely. And now we're asking them, instead of taking the money that they've made on our harbor, on our Willamette River, and taking it out of the country or out of the state, to return some of that money to clean up after themselves. And I think we have a right to ask that as citizens, and I hope that residents and citizens do ask for that.
Well, yeah, they could just, instead of giving their CEOs $10 million a year, they could give them $9. I don't know. That part of that whole corporate scene just drives me crazy when there's people barely making it, and these folks are getting, they're getting extra money, bonuses that amount to more than someone will make in their whole life that worked on that river during that time.
That's right.
And it just drives me crazy that
That's
it's
right.
that way, and that all that money went towards the top. I mean, they what is it? I can't remember how the phrase is, but they put the profits up and they throw the costs out. And if it's a Superfund site and the EPA's involved in it, I was thinking that would probably mean that it was public money. But that's not how it works. And I'm glad to hear that.
No, it's not public money. The EPA uses money from the industries, from the polluters. The polluters are...
There's a fund.
There's a fund, yeah. Well, there's not actually a fund because Superfund has been unfunded, but there's been some talk about bringing it back, which would be great. And basically what the fund was a tax or a fee on companies that produce petroleum products and chemicals. And to charge them a tax for the cleanup of these chemicals. And that would be a good thing. I think companies like Monsanto need to be taxed for the cleanup of these products that they've created that are really awful products that get into the environment and are cancer causing. They damage the environment, they damage human beings. So taxing them seems fair.
Well, it seems to me that here I am again. I know, but rather than like Monsanto in particular, rather than spend the money on testing it, they just spent the money on keeping it from being tested or keeping it from being put out into the public. What was wrong with it? That happens quite often.
It does happen. They put it out there without really knowing what it is,
Sure.
just to make a buck on it.
And use the money for damage control rather than for testing.
Well, that happens. Well, the Portland Harbor Community Advisory Group actually did some research and found out that other cities were suing Monsanto for PCB cleanup. And so we went to the city and said, why aren't we suing Monsanto also? Because the main chemical of concern in this 10-mile stretch is PCBs from Monsanto.
Mm-hmm.
So the city has actually taken the step, of joining the lawsuit against Monsanto, joining several other cities. I think there are 6 or 7 other cities. They're joining the lawsuit, and we'll see where that goes.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that the businesses aren't liable for what they dumped, but they're not. But Monsanto is also liable to some degree for creating a chemical, like you say, without testing it, without turning it loose in the public arena without enough testing.
Right. So, well, that might have something to do with why they are trying to buy Bayer or vice versa. I can't remember which is which, but those two companies are supposed to be trying to merge. But I think it's been stopped. But I don't know. Man, that's about as terrible as it gets. I can't believe we've gone 26 minutes in. We've got a 22-minute clip. We probably won't play it all. What was the woman's name? Want to give her credit? Was it Emily?
Oh, Cassie Cohen?
No, the gal that did the video.
Oh, I believe, I'm not sure of the name of the person who actually created the video, but I know that it was a Portland Harbor Community Coalition who
put it together.
Put it together, yeah. And their members are the ones who are on the video.
All right, well, that's good. We should get away from these talking heads and go to some different ones for now. And we'll be back in a little while.
As he gazed upon the river was slowly becoming a place that drew all manner of things into itself. Things from ditches, trash, drugs, leaves, logs, debris of all kinds, until it looked like an overly dressed matron trying to pretend she was her former self. The rains were acid, the city stifling, and the river was slowly dying. Its exuberance lost and nothing to refresh itself. The streams were being polluted before they could reach her. She could only pull herself through the bed of the ancient carvings of land made by volcanoes that erupted eons ago, when she was just a young stream, before life happened to her, before progress happened.
For the Portland Native community, we've always been here. We've had our villages here, and we always had the river as a highway to connect the villages from one tribe to another, and as well as a source of economy with trade. The river is also very much a very spiritual element that provides life for all of us.
Then, starting in 1800s, thousands of mainly white settlers arrived in the Portland area. They developed hundreds of industrial sites along the riverbanks, depositing heavy metals and pesticides and other chemicals into the water, soil, and river sediments. Today, those compounds have been found to be harmful to human health and the environment. And because of the contamination, some type of fish found in the Portland Harbor, such as bass, carp, and catfish, currently pose health risks to those who eat them.
My first introduction to the river was stories from my grandfather. He grew up in North Portland. In the summertime, in between school sessions, he'd take his little rowboat or canoe over to Swan Island, and he'd camp there for a week. He'd live off of what he caught or hunted. If he was to do that today, the fish would poison him, if there are any fish that are edible at all. It needs to be changed.
Many of these industries contribute to the U.S. military effort in the World Wars, and thousands of African Americans immigrated to Portland to work in the shipyards.
We are the black migration who left a place we knew to descend into a place we didn't know, to experience the same but different, to adapt to change, whether weather or attitude, to blend to begin again, and not quite blended, but like whole milk that's separated into cream and less bodied full milk. However hostile the environment, we endured by the weekend with Friday night dancing and spiritual prancing on Sunday to leave the slights on the floor, enabling us to push onto Monday once more. Hard to verbalize our dilemma, but with a grunt and a oomph and a stare as we stepped forward to work harder with less reward than the others that were there. We first came to Portland. We lived on Russell and Interstate, which is Whitmer's now. And my father and mother both worked as shipyard workers, and one paycheck was used to live on, the other one was put away.
Shipyard workers were exposed to toxic substances such as lead and asbestos.
In the first place, my dad was on his property. He had coal, so he dug coal. And then when we moved to Lawrence, Kansas, he worked at a munition place. So that was the gas and stuff that they were. So again, and then when he got here, he was a chipper.
What is a chip?
The chip the paint off of the.
Yeah, and it has lead paint in it, and other things too. Did he talk about that?
Well, we were ignorant to the fact that could be environment, because he had had asthma as a kid.
Yeah.
So he just thought, he didn't realize he was probably being exposed to more and more stuff that was making it worse.
By the 1970s, environmentalists and others were able to reduce the point source contaminants, which is when sewage and other toxins are directly dumped into the river. Point source pollution has improved even more dramatically over the past 30 years thanks to the Big Pipe project.
I've worked on the river, I've worked over the river, I've built bridges, I've worked in the shipyards. I've seen the shipyards where they sandblast the vessels, and before they've completely cleaned up all the sand and the paint chips and everything else that's come off of the ships, they lower the ship back into the water, float it out, and everything that's trapped in the sand floats into the river and pollutes the river.
But there remains a legacy of toxic substance from industrial activities.
Can't people see what is happening to my friend?
In 2012, Governor Portland and others founded the Portland Harbor Community Coalition in an effort to raise the voice of those most impacted by contamination.
We're approached by a couple of community members in 2012 who were concerned that the public, especially people that are more affected by the contaminated river, were not aware of the cleanup efforts of the federal government and the timeline that was coming up soon for making a plan for the cleanup of the river. And so we, because the organization had done some work around cleaning up land, turning it into community space and involving community members in that work, we decided to kind of explore what would it be like to approach community groups and individuals and start a conversation about, is there a need to have a grassroots effort or just even a community-based effort to discuss how to clean up the river. So we started having some group discussions, and after maybe 5 months of brainstorming, and it became pretty clear that there was a need to form what people decided was a coalition, a necessary kind of coming together of community groups to address the cleanup of the river and many surrounding issues as well. So early on decided that traditionally impacted communities of color, immigrant communities that are fishing in the river, that people may see a sign up that's a warning sign, a fish advisory sign down by the river, but it's out of necessity that many people are fishing. And because of the cultural connections and history of the First Nation peoples, that was also a focus that was being lost in the broader kind of context of federal agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, leading this effort. And so we started forming this coalition to bring together all of these different perspectives and groups to raise the voices of folks that are most affected and have the most history here along the river, to be able to lead the effort and to be able to say this is what is the priority for these different communities. And there's a lot of common issues, and then there's a lot of culturally specific issues and ideas that have come up as well.
One of PHCC's goals is to ensure that it becomes safer to catch and consume fish.
It was a pastime and feeding, you know.
Yeah.
We ate fish probably once a week because it was just healthy for you. And I was never seen.
The river is also very much a very spiritual element that provides life for all of us. The fish that come out of it, the nurturements, and even the seaweed, all are elements that we find respectful in our ceremonies. It teaches young people patience, going out and fishing. It teaches the river how it continually flows, to never give up and keep on going with things. Also, the river is a lifeline for us. The river are the veins that run through Mother Earth, and we need to keep her healthy.
My name is Enrique. I'm from the Videos Verdes. I like parks and rivers. I like fishing with my family. Sí, tengo una que hace como 5 años mi familia y yo fuimos a pescar y no sabíamos que el río Willamette estaba contaminado porque no estábamos informados acerca de eso. No pescamos ningún pescado, gracias a Dios, desafortunadamente para mis hijos, pero después que supe de que el río Willamette está contaminado, le dimos gracias a Dios que nuestra salud no fue expuesto a estas químicas.
But PHCC is also concerned that as the river gets cleaned up, those that have suffered in the past may not benefit from the future river cleanup. PHCC is concerned about the houseless population living along the river. Who will get job training and jobs related to the cleanup, and how much will they pay? And what will continue to happen to housing prices in inner Portland neighborhoods as the river gets cleaned up and new developments come in?
I lived on the river for quite a while, and it has its many challenges. The river goes up and down with the weather. We have the rain to battle with, the snow, the police, the parks, our stuff being stolen from us. And then we find out about a year or so ago that the river is completely contaminated. A lot of pesticides, leads, mercuries. I've fished out of these rivers. I've eaten in these rivers. I just recently beat cancer. I don't know that it wasn't because of that. Because I've lived on the rivers myself. I've eaten out of the rivers. I've swam in the rivers. There's a lot of cancer-causing agents and stuff that are in these rivers. I might know I'm not the only one. Once we found out the river was contaminated and a lot of toxins in the river, we found it more complicated because we knew we had to get farther away from the river. And it made it harder because I knew I couldn't fish and we couldn't really eat out of the river.
People along the river need a safe place to go. And we need to be able to afford to get that so they can be away from the river while the cleanup is starting.
The cleanup process over the next 20 years needs to have a plan to educate and teach the people who do not have the skills and abilities to work right now today, who are discriminated against with the excuse that they're inexperienced, to give them work experience, job experience, income of a level that allows them to hold their heads up and be responsible instead of discriminated against. there's a huge opportunity, and there needs to be an educational program to teach these businesses how to work with the river and help clean the river, so that it's not just the Bechtels and the Kiewits of the world that continue to make billions of dollars a year, but everyone has a chance to share in this cleanup effort. The ones who make the $1 billion a year are the ones who helped pollute and destroy it. They shouldn't make the profits of the cleaning it up.
The community that's most affected needs to have a voice in deciding how that development happens over time, and how housing and economic development, comes into play because of all of the historical displacement of the African American community, of Native folks, of just low-income people in North Portland over many decades.
Well, Emmanuel was doing the same thing to people up on this end. People had their homes on Vancouver, and they were pushing them out because they wanted that land, and they were not paying them a lot of money for their. It was corporates. It's been bad here all the time. It's just been a gradual taking over. I mean, it's very, very subtle, but once you really see the pattern, it's not subtle. It's very planned out. The people that are the most tangible are your lower rent. I mean, your lower income people, and it's usually people of color.
It's an issue that more people should know about and be able to get involved with to, really make a difference for the community and decide what the community wants to see change. There's one thing with this federal process happening to clean up the river, but how can the community come together and decide what's the highest priority?
Me gustaría que de aquí en 20 años el problema esté resuelto para que las familias y comunidades vengamos a un lugar seguro a disfrutarlos y poder dejarle también a las nuevas generaciones un río sano. Y me gustaría que se siga trabajando para poder seguirnos educando, porque si lo van a limpiar de aquí a 20 años, si no hay una educación de cómo debemos protegerlos, siento que podría pasar lo mismo. Entonces, me gustaría que una vez esté limpio, la gente esté educada para preservar el río.
I just see that the river actually getting cleaned up so that, like my husband said, so that people can have a home to go back to, fish, swim, eat the fish, to have their camps back there and to be happy again. We need a clean and safe river.
What it means to be a Portlander is that we are a green state. We are known to be a green state. And if we knowingly let our river be polluted every single day, then what are we really doing here?
Las personas que están aquí hayan escogido este lugar para saber sobre la contaminación del río, sobre todo cómo ver a los participantes dar su opinión y tratar de buscar una mejor solución para la limpieza del río.
Yeah, I think it's important that we can still use the river as a resource and we can still enjoy the river because it's been part of our city, our town, our state for so long, and just seeing what it's become it's really tragic. And so I think it's important that we clean it up so we can get back to being able to use it and being able to enjoy it the way that we used to.
Native people, non-native people, all of us together need to take part in this. A lot of the businesses and potential responsible parties, they have to play their role. But we as residents, we as taxpayers and voters, we have to make our voice heard. Our community especially welcomes allies and people who share the same values we do, the values of harmony, the values of connecting in nature to people, and not just the bottom line of profit. We are all about standing together with everyone.
What I'd like to see is for the river to eventually get cleaned up. The people who in the past and in the present, be responsible for the contaminants that have been put in the river. There's still many companies, manufacturers, corporations that are along the rivers that I still don't think are doing their part to be able to help keep the river cleaned up. But to hold them responsible for helping clean up the rivers so that one day we'll have a clean, safe place to call home along the Willamette River.
We have used this river for transport, for food, for everything, for life, for, you know, for thousands of years, and it's time we should go back to that. I think there should be jobs. We want the positive part of jobs, but they need to be clean jobs, not just where the river's used as a waste stream for dirty jobs.
De aquí a 20 años, mi visión es que el río Willamette esté seguro, esté limpio y todos estemos libres para ir a divertirnos, a nadar, jugar en la arena, a que nuestros hijos puedan pescar pescados libres de contaminantes, sin riesgo de nuestra salud, y que todos estemos compartiendo el río y conviviendo sin ninguna preocupación de que nos podamos enfermar o algo más.
When people were exposed to contaminants in the shipyards, how do you take back someone's life
You
or
can't
someone's
take
health?
back their life, and then you don't. Then it doesn't even come out until the person is dead. My dad was dead by the time they really started saying mesothelioma was caused by asbestos and all of this, and he suffered. And you know, I don't even want to talk about that. It just makes me so angry.
Yeah.
Because his environment killed him.
It belongs to us. That river belongs to the people.
People can be healed, rivers can be healed.
The location was downtown Portland, not the Portland he grew up in, but the metropolitan city it had become. Now I know what they mean by the good old days. I remember swimming in the Willamette, the delicious fish we ate. And now we are warned not to swim, nor eat the fish. Mutilated fish, decimated fish. Can't they see from their Lexuses and their fine cars that speed across the bridges, taking them to high-powered jobs, that my friend, my river is dying? The room was crowded as protesters stated their cases one by one. And I felt vindicated that some others had seen the distress of my friend. And discussions of meetings with city council, wildlife departments, Safe Water, and others that were raising their voices to save her. She is worthy to be saved, they cried. She has done the job as the river. She has done it proudly for years. We must save her. We can save her. We will save her, was their chant.
But
All
Hunter,
right.
yeah.
Welcome back. Caught us in jaw on here. Great video. I'd like to see the end of it, but I'm sure there wasn't much left. But we're down to less than 10 minutes, and we want to talk about this festival here. So I don't know if we probably have graphic about it, but that's the festival right there. We can put the graphic up as well. These folks, I guess it's going to cover it up. All right. So there it is, and Barbara, what there's speakers and there's quite a I did plug in, didn't I? Yeah, there's quite a bit of stuff going on there.
Yeah, there is quite a bit of stuff. We're going to have live music, different kinds of live music. We're going to have some African dance, some children who do African dance, a little troupe of dancers. We are going to have food vendors, 50 Licks ice cream and artisan ice cream, beer garden, environmental fair. We're going to have live birds from Audubon, actually live salmon from the ODFW, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, bringing in. So there's going to be a lot to do. It'll be very fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this was I'm sure it was up there, the 29th?
No, it's actually the 31st.
31st is
July
what it was,
31st. Right. And the mission of this event is to reconnect with the lower Willamette River as a community-owned asset. So we want to shift the view of the river as merely a waste stream and look at it more as our river, because literally it belongs to the people of Oregon. It's the commons and we own it, and we want to look at that river and advocate for its safety. So the mission is not only to reframe the river, how we look at the river, especially the lower river, but also to gather responses that we can send to EPA. So when people come to the event, they will have an opportunity to write down some responses, or maybe even email the EPA while they're there at the event.
Well, it occurred to me when you were saying it's not a waste stream. Well, what it is, it's a life stream, not a waste stream, and it's been conducted or treated that way for I don't know, how long have we been here? Probably the late 1850s or something like that.
150 years.
At least that. Yeah, there we go. It's back up there. Good. We need to noon to 7, so odds are pretty good. It'll be good weather. Last year was probably 100 degrees, if I remember. It was hot.
It was warm, but it was a little bit overcast, so it was just really just about right.
All right.
Yeah, a little bit overcast, and we have the great view down there at Cathedral Park. We've got views of the Forest Park Hills and the river and the St. John's Bridge.
That's right under the bridge.
Right under the bridge, so you got really nice views. It's actually not a very well-known park or part of the park, and we want to bring some attention to the fact that we have a really nice waterfront down in St. John's, and one of the best greenways left in Portland.
And so you're on the Willamette. You're on the Willamette there. Is there some serious, really hot spots nearby there?
Well, there are some serious hot spots nearby. Actually, both a mile south of the bridge and a mile north of the bridge, there's hot spots for petroleum products. So they do plan on doing some dredging in that area.
So a couple of things I was thinking about. They're going to dig that up, and of course they're going to take it somewhere, far, far away and bury it and put cement over it, right?
Well, they're not taking it far, far away. In fact, they're not. We're worried that they're not taking it far enough away. One of the proposals is to pick up the dredge material, the contaminated dredge, and put it right back in the river in slip 1, and then put an earthen berm across that area to keep it from getting back in the river. Unfortunately, they admit that it would leak back, things would leak back, toxins would leak back into the river from this earthen berm. They're not talking about any kind of lining under it, so things would leak down into the water, down into the groundwater that way. So we're not in favor of that, and that would be a really good thing for people to support the community stakeholders on, that we do not want a toxic waste dump in North Portland on that river. That is crazy to put a toxic waste dump on sand fill in an earthquake hazard zone in a flood zone.
So where do they get these people that come up with these ideas? And they pay them?
Good question. Good question.
I mean, sand is pretty porous. And you say there's not going to be any type of lining of any kind?
They're not proposing any lining. Right. So
I'm glad I brought it up. I mean, it's worse than what we were talking when we were discussing this earlier.
Right.
So that's pretty terrible. And one other thing I wanted to bring up, and the pollution coming from the upper river with the, there's a lot of industry, and not so much industry, it's farming and agriculture up there. And all that phosphorus and nitrogen and all gets leaches and comes down. Now that stuff, it probably dissipates a lot more than PCBs and lead and all that, but it still's got to be a problem though.
It is a problem. It's a big problem. It's a huge problem. In fact, we brought that up. We have brought that up several times with the DEQ. What are we going to do about that upriver pollution that's coming from agricultural businesses? And it probably has some influence on those algae blooms we're getting in the river in late summer. And some of those algae blooms can be really dangerous because depending on what kind of bacteria is involved, they can actually harm people, harm living things.
And they harm just by suffocating them, taking the oxygen out of the water.
Well, that's true too, but some of the bacteria, you don't want your dog to even go in there. If they drink it, they can be harmed, like they can die. So the runoff from upriver is a big problem that we have not adequately dealt with yet.
Well, since it's been going on for generations, isn't it also in the sediment?
You mean the phosphorus and those things?
whatever was, those.
I'm not sure if those products are as persistent as the pollutants that we have in the lower river. I'm not sure that they how long they stick around, but I do know this: if they wash out down the Columbia River and out to the ocean, it's not really a good thing. That it changes the pH of the water, which is not makes it worse for animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's just like flushing it into someone else's backyard, but
Yeah.
it still affects Portland.
It does, yeah. No, it affects Portland. This is our river that belongs to us, and I can't emphasize that enough. The biggest group of stakeholders in this Willamette River cleanup are us. The state of Oregon owns the bottom of the river. That means that the community owns the river through the public trust doctrine. And if this is a democracy, then we should have a say in how this river is cleaned up. And what the community groups and representatives are saying is what we have now isn't good enough. And so we need everyone to write down or email their comments to the EPA and let them know that we want a cleanup that results in safety.
Mm-hmm. We'll get that graphic up of that website where people can go directly. I don't remember which one it was. We'll put one up and see if that's the right one.
Okay.
It's really important that it's public lands, belong to the public, but they are not going to be taken care of unless the public is involved and it stays involved in doing something about it.
Yeah, I'm sad to say it's a situation where we have to stand up and be heard if we want
the right one?
Want this river cleaned. Yeah, that's it.
That's the one where they can go and get funneled right into the tunnel or whatever that'll get them where they want to go. Because
yeah, you can actually make a comment right on that website, and it goes to the EPA.
And there's a stock comment they can sign on to,
they could do that, or they could add their own comments to it, or they can actually upload something that they've written or typed previously and upload it and send it as well.
Paste it in. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good point, because it has to be. Quite often, like you say, it's public comment, but we have a right to say something, but it's difficult to force them to consider what's being said. That's a whole nother issue. So
well, if there's enough responses, they have to consider it. I mean, it's one of the parts of CERCLA law is that they have to take into consideration the public has to accept the plan, and if the public isn't accepting the plan, then it's against the law.
Ah, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's part of the law. So one of the things I did want to mention too, Jim,
We're down to 40 seconds here.
Oh,
so
40 seconds.
Yeah, it goes quick.
Is that the river's still a very beautiful river, and it's still full of salmon. It's definitely worth saving, and this festival on the 31st of July, this is about really enjoying all the positive aspects of the river and what it can be and what it's going to be when it's restored.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I never think of the Willamette as a beautiful river because of how we've treated it. So we need to treat it in the other sense of the word and fix it up. Well, thanks for tuning in. That's it for now. I want to thank the crew. Of course, I want to thank Barbara, and we'll be back next week. Good night.
Thank you.